Let me show you why the Department of Justice thinks you don't care. Why the Department of Justice thinks you're not following this. Don Lemon did an interview with George Santos's ex-roommate. And in that interview, an incredibly enlightening sentence was said that I would like to share with you so we can discuss it. Let's look at that interview, which, by the way, is hilarious.
We're learning more about the lies New York Congressman George Santos told as a younger man about his family's wealth and his business success. His former roommate, Gregory Maury Parker, joins us now. And in full transparency, a little technical difficulty there. And so we're glad you're here and that you're able to hear us loud and clear. You good?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Don.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, you knew Santos for a number of years, starting in 2013. How did you end up living in the same house?
So my lease in Astoria was up in Queens, and he was like, oh, well, the New York rental market is ridiculous. Come stay with me for, a month or two while we get everything, sorted out and try to find you a place. And I was like, oh, okay. So I took him up on it, moved in. It was definitely an interesting few months.
Well, explain that to us. What was he like back then? Why do you say it was interesting?
Well, I suppose the biggest thing that I took away from it was like just delusions of grandeur. Like he would just go to bars with, like rolls of $100 bills. And, 3 days later, he would have no money. Or, he would constantly be saying, oh, well, I'm going to sell my phone. I'm going to sell my phone. Do you know anybody who wants to buy it? And,
Look, no hate here. If you've ever lived a little bit, how do I say it? If you've ever had lived a little bit spare, let's say, belt's awful tight, you've had a couple of rough months, and that's standard for you. Everybody's had a friend like that, the I gotta sell my phone guy. And then 2 weeks later, they've got like a cheap-ass $50 phone that they got from a pawn shop, somewhat reliable because it only kind of understands their SIM card. It doesn't really work on their network. Been there. Sympathetic to that. It's sort of what he does after this that is the issue.
I'm like, well, why are you selling it? And he's like, oh, well, don't worry about it. And it's just, things just started continuously spiraling and getting like kind of ridiculously crazy. His mother was a housekeeper in Manhattan, and it just didn't seem feasible for him supposedly to come from all this generational wealth, if you will. And why are you doing the things that you're doing? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, he had made allegations that he came from generational wealth, and you're saying that his mother was a housekeeper in the city, in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So I just want to, in fact, he's done so well, there we go. I just want to praise Don Lemon a little bit here, also because I won't get many opportunities in the man's career to praise Don Lemon. Every compliment is backhanded. So that guy who he's talking to is not media trained. And it's the nature of doing the kind of show Don Lemon's doing. It was not the habit for the longest time for anchors to clarify like Lemon just did. It's a small thing, but it's the sort of crack in the armor that the GOP loves to take advantage of. So what he just said, taken in isolation, that former roommate, it does sound nonsensical. He said generational wealth, mom was a housekeeper. What he meant to say was it doesn't make sense because he says he comes from generational wealth, and yet his mom is a housekeeper. Don Lemon just lampshaded that and said, like, oh, what you're saying here is a little off. Good. Because the strategy of the GOP is to use confusion so that the people who are on their side will say, I can't understand this, I'm just going to assume I'm right. And the people who are not on their side will say, I can't understand this, I'll wait for the next thing, the next huge scandal to get angry. So thank you, Don Lemon, for keeping it clear.
In Manhattan.
Yeah.
So people are going to wonder, and also, you knew him through another name, right? The last name DeVolder.
Yes, I've always known him as Anthony DeVolder.
Yeah.
So we know he used to go by, he said he went by George DeVolder - Santos for a while. Interesting, this guy lived with him for a while. Only ever knew him by that other name, Anthony DeVolder. Gone, man.
Never known him as George Santos. I was actually quite surprised. I guess he went by his middle name and his mother's name. But yeah, no, I've always known him as Anthony DeVolder.
Mm-hmm. So listen, people, Greg, are going to wonder why you're coming out. They're going to say, well, that's his side of the story. And do need to tell our viewers that we did reach out to George Santos's representatives, his lawyers, and we haven't heard back from them. Although we have been trying since this story started to get an interview with him. He has declined. His representatives have declined. And even his office in Washington. You say something wasn't adding up between the way that Santos talked about himself and the life that he led, right? His name, Anthony DeVolder, as you knew him, his wealth and what have you. What else doesn't add up? What else?
Well, just I kind of assumed that he had made up, about going to Baruch and NYU. But then I thought, well, maybe I was wrong, after the election. Because I'm sure the DCCC, and the RNC would have, investigated him. And
right there. That is the primary issue that we have in, let me take that back. Outside of the Department of Justice, outside of the actual written into law, people whose job it is to hold people in line. When it comes to just the population, that's the main problem we have. The assumption that somebody would have taken care of it. The bystander syndrome. It's not that we're dumb. It's that we assume there is more competence going on behind the scenes than there actually is. This guy, he's not dumb. He thought, well, I don't think George Santos went to any of these things. Or excuse me, he knows him as Anthony DeVolder. I don't think Anthony went to these colleges. And then he saw this guy now going by George Santos out there saying that he went to these colleges. And he assumed that either the state GOP or the state Democrats would have chimed in and said something if that wasn't true. He assumed, in other words, that Santos would have seen consequences if it wasn't true. And when he didn't see consequences, he assumed it was true. Until later. Until it was too late. When it did come out. When somebody did get off their butt. And I believe it was local journalists, actually, that finally found this out. So, I'm assuming if you're watching this show, just based on our reach, based on who tends to watch it, I'm assuming you do know that Donald Trump really did violate the law a whole lot. Problem is, the vast majority of the country doesn't follow this stuff at all. True story. I once had a close friend who asked me when I was ranting about Trump, is he a Democrat or a Republican? A lot of people who vote are that uninformed. When the vast majority of the country hears a bunch of people saying Trump did crime, Trump did crime, he did crime, and then there's no charges filed, there's no consequences for that crime, they assume, oh, he must not have done it. It's that simple, the thought process. And it's not an unreasonable thought process to have. You just assume people are doing their jobs. But we have learned they're not. It means those of us that do follow it do need to make a habit of letting the Department of Justice know we see them. We're expecting results. We are in an unusually politically active time in the U.S. Let us, first of all, stay politically active. Assuming we win the battles we have to win, we could be so much better than we are, using the very techniques we're going to use to win these battles. But first things first, we need accountability for these crimes. Let's see if there is a little bit more to be had here.
Because I'm sure the DCCC, and the RNC would have, investigated him, and at least his opponent would have done some research. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is just, the truth, and I was incorrect. But I mean, obviously, the truth has finally come out. And I don't understand. Did he go like one by one to everybody in his district and just literally pull the wool over their eyes? Like, how?
Okay, so he also mentions New York Democrats there. Or rather, he said the DCCC. Yeah, an utter failing on the part of the Democrats. Let's be clear about who the biggest failure is here. It's the Republicans, of course. But we've known now for some time what they are. We know they're not interested in truth. We know that McCarthy, for example, will happily work with George Santos. He doesn't care about the truth. He cares about having the majority in the House. That's it. So his instinct there to say, I would think at least his opponent would care. Yeah, we got a problem with New York Democrats, and we have to change the leadership of the New York Democrats. They are responsible for, right now, the U.S. House not being majority Democrat. It could have been. It was very close to being. Primarily, the criticism of them, first of all, they are center-right, New York Democrats. There is a highly corrupt party structure in New York for the Democrats. It comes from the Cuomo days, the Cuomo machine. And now it's running without Cuomo. And what is left over is something that cannot even use that corruption effectively. They ran their candidates on speaking out against crime, even though crime was an issue largely drummed up by Republicans as a talking point. Yes, there is crime to be dealt with around the country. No, it was not the problem that Republicans were saying it was. And most Democrats around the country chose to deal with reality. New York Democrats chose to go with the talking points of their opponents, just accept them, and pitch to the people the plans they were going to do to take care of them. Result is Democrats lost big time in New York. And we got guys like George Santos. They also spend so much of their time, so much of their effort hunting for progressives in the primaries in New York. That's how they spend if you donate to the New York Democrats. That is the way they're going to be spending that money is to fight progressives, not the other side. They'll fight the base of their side rather than actually take on the GOP. So this guy had a very reasonable reaction. We got to change Democrat leadership in New York for sure.
It's just flabbergasting.
I'm wondering if this was the end of, I guess it was a rocky relationship, and it started off well, and because this is, again, according to you, you believe that he stole a Burberry scarf from you and wore it when he gave a speech in D.C. on January of 2021. This is January 5th, 2021, one day before the Capitol attack. Now, CNN has not independently verified this claim. In the speech, Santos falsely claimed that the 2020 congressional election was stolen from him. Now, you say this is not, it's more than just a stolen scarf. This is bigger than that. Did he take other things, and why are you saying this is bigger than just a scarf?
Well, it just bothers me. I mean, he is one of the highest elected officials in the country. He is responsible for making the laws. And yes, I mean, I do miss my stone check Burberry scarf, but at the same time, it's why I feel like they're not focusing enough on the issues at hand. Where did all this money come from to finance the campaign? Why? The whole thing is just, it's quite bewildering to me. I mean, how he even got elected.
Absolutely true. Great questions asked by a person whose only qualifications are being the roommate of a former roommate of a representative. Great questions. Should be commended. He did a great job. Yes, indeed, he is making the laws. And where did that money come from? Santos is being investigated now. I'm not confident that the Department of Justice finding information about him doing a crime will in any way mean that charges are filed. The standard line we hear is, well, you have to have an airtight case. If you're going to file charges, the case has to be absolutely certain. And that is only true, I find, when it comes to politicians, when it comes to rich people. They can be pretty sure when it comes to you or me. They can say, more likely than not, when it comes to you or me. When it comes to politicians, no. Not only do they have to be sure, they have to be sure that you know and are expecting results. Links in the description if you're interested in putting pressure on them.